Laura Bennett did not expect the knock because the house had been silent all afternoon. The kind of silence that settles after years of living alone with memories, and as warm steam filled the small bathroom. She stood at the sink thinking about nothing in particular when the sound came, firm but careful, followed by her son Ethan's voice saying, "Mom," in a way that made her pause, not from fear, but from surprise. Because she had not heard him come home and because his tone carried something heavier than a simple question. And as she answered that she would be out in a moment, her mind moved faster than her hands. Thinking about how Ethan was no longer the loud child who once ran through the halls, but a quiet young man shaped by loss, responsibility, and thoughts he rarely shared. And when she stepped back into the hallway, fully dressed and steady, she found him standing there holding an old photo album with worn edges, his eyes unsure, as if he was crossing an invisible line. And he explained he had found it while cleaning the garage and thought she might want it. And the moment felt ordinary on the surface, but carried a strange weight, because the album was from a time before grief, before the house learned how to echo, and as Laura took it, she felt a soft ache. Noticing how grown her son looked, how distant yet close he seemed, and how this simple act of him knocking instead of walking away spoke of respect and concern, not intrusion. And as he returned to his room, Laura sat alone on the couch, flipping through pages filled with old smiles, family trips, and moments frozen before everything changed and the memories rushed in fast, reminding her of love lost and time moving forward without permission. And she realized how long it had been since someone checked on her. Not as a parent, not as someone who always held things together, but as a person who could be fragile too. And later that night, lying in bed with the rain tapping against the window, the knock replayed in her mind again and again. Not because it was strange, but because it revealed something she had avoided seeing. That both she and her son were quietly waiting for connection, unsure how to ask for it, living under the same roof yet carrying separate worries. And Laura understood that the moment mattered not because of where she was or what she was doing, but because it marked the first crack in the walls they had built around themselves. And as she closed her eyes, she sensed that something had shifted. That the knock was not an interruption, but a beginning, gentle, unresolved, and filled with questions that neither of them was ready to say out loud yet. The days after the knock moved quickly but felt heavy, as if something unsaid was following both Laura and Ethan through the house. And Laura noticed the change first when Ethan started leaving early in the mornings. His footsteps rushed, his greetings short, and his room door often closed, not in anger but in thought. And while she kept herself busy with work, laundry, and cooking meals that sometimes went untouched, her mind stayed on him, wondering if she had missed a moment when he needed her more. And in the evenings, she sat on the porch with a mug of tea, watching cars pass and lights flick on in neighboring houses, feeling the quiet stretch longer than before, and memories of her late husband returned without warning, reminding her of how the house once felt full and safe, and how loneliness does not arrive suddenly but grows slowly, filling small spaces and inside. Ethan watched his mother from a distance, seeing her pause more often, noticing how she stared out windows or held old things a second longer than necessary. And he felt a responsibility he did not know how to carry, because he loved her but did not know how to speak about loss, or about the fear that she might disappear into sadness if he did nothing. And one night, as Laura sorted through the photo album again, she stopped on a page where she was laughing freely, and the sight of her younger self stirred something painful but hopeful, making her realize how long it had been since she felt truly seen. And though she had friends and coworkers, none of them knew the quiet version of her life, the evenings, filled with thought instead of noise. And across the hallway, Ethan stood outside her door for a moment, listening for any sign that she might call out, but the silence stopped him, and he returned to his room, feeling both close and far at the same time. And as the week moved on, small moments added to the distance. Missed dinners, short conversations, shared spaces without shared words. And Laura began to understand that the knock had opened a door she could not close again because it showed her how disconnected they had become while trying to protect each other from pain. And one evening, after another quiet meal, Laura decided she could not let the distance turn into a wall. Because love that stays silent can still fade. And she made up her mind that the next moment they shared would not pass without honesty. And as she turned off the lights and walked to her bedroom, she felt a mix of fear and hope, knowing that whatever came next would change the balance of their lives. And somewhere down the hall, Ethan felt the same pull, both of them waiting for the right moment to speak, both unsure who would take the first step. Laura chose a quiet evening to speak, the kind where the sky dimmed early and the house felt still. And she asked Ethan to sit with her in the living room, her voice calm but steady, and he agreed without protest, sensing the weight of the moment. And as they sat across from each other, the space between them felt larger than the room, filled with things neither had said. And Laura began by asking if he was all right, not as a mother checking a task, but as someone truly listening. And Ethan hesitated before answering, his hands resting together as if holding a thought in place. And he admitted that he worried about her, that he noticed how quiet she had become, how she carried her days without complaint, and his words surprised her. Not because they were wrong, but because she had not realized how clearly he saw her. And she felt something soften inside her, a release she had been holding for years. And she told him that she was learning how to live again after loss. That grief did not leave but changed shape. And that sometimes silence was easier than explaining pain. And Ethan listened closely, his expression serious. And he admitted that the knock had been his way of checking on her, not knowing how else to start. And hearing this made Laura understand that the moment she had replayed in her mind was shared by both of them, each wondering how to reach the other without causing hurt. And the honesty moved quickly between them after that, words flowing easier once the first wall fell. And Laura spoke about missing companionship, about feeling like time had paused after her husband passed. And Ethan admitted that he feared losing her too, not physically but emotionally. And the room felt warmer as the truth settled, not heavy but freeing. And when the conversation ended, there was relief in the silence that followed, not distance. And later that night, Laura sat alone on the edge of her bed, her thoughts clearer than they had been in years. And she picked up her phone and noticed a message from Daniel. It's an old friend she had recently reconnected with after years apart. And the message was simple, asking how her week had been, yet it made her smile in a way that surprised her, because it reminded her that her life could still open in small, respectful ways. And she replied without hesitation, allowing herself to feel interest without guilt, and down the hall Ethan prepared to go out with friends, feeling lighter, knowing his concern had been heard. And as Laura watched the door close behind him, she realized that the knock had shifted something important, not by creating confusion, but by inviting honesty. And she understood that caring does not always come in perfect words. Sometimes it comes in quiet actions that ask without demanding. And as she turned off the lights, she felt hope return gently, not as a rush, but as a steady presence, knowing that both she and her son had taken a step forward, and whatever came next would be built on openness rather than fear. Weeks passed, and the house felt lighter, filled with quiet laughter and shared meals. And Laura noticed how Ethan moved more freely, smiling at small jokes, leaving doors open, and sitting near her without the weight of distance between them. And she herself felt a gentle change, a warmth she hadn't realized she was missing. As if the knock in the bathroom had opened more than a door, it had opened a space for connection. And one rainy evening, as Laura prepared dinner, there was another knock at the front door, and when she opened it, Daniel stood there holding a small bouquet, his eyes kind and a little nervous. And in that moment, she felt a flutter she had not felt in years, a quiet thrill of anticipation that life could still offer surprises and gentle romance. And Ethan, standing at the top of the stairs, paused as he saw Daniel, understanding without words that this was part of his mother's healing. And he smiled softly, realizing that the knock he had once delivered in the bathroom was different, but connected a symbol of care and attention that could take many forms. And Laura invited Daniel in, and they talked while Ethan watched from a distance, noticing how natural the conversation flowed, how her face lit up with laughter and subtle smiles. And he felt happy for her in a way that was both protective and freeing, knowing that she deserved connection and joy after years of carrying loss. Quietly. And later that night, when the house settled into calm, Laura sat alone, reflecting on the chain of moments that had brought her here, remembering the first knock, how it had startled her, and how over days and weeks it had grown into honesty, understanding, and renewed closeness with her son. And now it extended to new possibilities with Daniel. A gentle reminder that life can be layered with relationships that respect the past while embracing the future. And she realized that love and care are not only about dramatic declarations, but also about small gestures, quiet attentiveness, and moments where hearts listen to each other without pressure. And as she thought about Ethan's growth, his sensitivity, and the way he had handled the weeks of change, she felt a mixture of pride and relief, knowing that they had moved together from distance to understanding without conflict or pain. And the rain continued softly, marking time as she allowed herself to imagine evenings filled with laughter, shared stories, and the gentle presence of someone who could be more than a friend. And as Laura put the flowers on the table and glanced at the empty chair where Ethan had just passed, she understood that the knock she had once remembered with a strange mix of surprise and curiosity had been a quiet catalyst, creating ripples that reshaped her home and heart. And she smiled at the thought that life often nudges people gently, teaching them to pay attention to those who care, to embrace moments without fear, hey, and to open themselves to connection again. And in that realization, she felt gratitude for small interruptions, for gestures that speak louder than words, and for the awareness that sometimes the simplest acts, like a knock, a shared look, a smile, can transform relationships and allow hope, love, and warmth to re-enter lives that once felt too quiet or too heavy. And as she closed her eyes that night, she carried a soft certainty that the house, once heavy with silence, was now alive with care, attention, and the quiet promise of new beginnings that respected the past, embraced the present, and left the future open to possibilities. And she knew that moments like these, small yet profound, would stay with her, guiding her through the days ahead with gentle hope and understanding. And the memory of the first knock would always remain, not as confusion or mystery, but as the turning point that reminded her that love in its many forms often arrives quietly and changes everything.